Hello, everyone. Looks like the number is still climbing on folks to get in here, so we will wait a couple minutes before we get started. While we do that, can someone put in the chat that you can see my PowerPoint? I've confirmed that my colleagues can see it, but want to make sure that you can as well. Perfect. Thanks for those of you who wrote there. That also means you can hear me, I presume, so that is good news as well. Um, We, I am able to see the chat, so I will watch that a little bit as I present. But mostly my colleagues Hillary and Kate, who are on here, will be monitoring that. They will answer questions as we go. They will flag me if there's something that's obviously confusing as we go throughout the presentation that might be worth me pausing and answering. But we'll also make sure that we save time at the end for questions as well. So please make sure that you put all of your questions in the chat. Your microphones and cameras are muted, so that is the best way to communicate through to us about any questions that you have. We, at the end of this, will download the recording as well as the chat. So if we don't have time at the end to answer all questions, we'll make sure that we answer those when we send out the recording and the PowerPoint presentation. But we'll try to get through as many as possible. In full transparency, I do have a hard stop to get to a meeting with an institution right after this, but Hillary and Kate will stay on and try to answer as many questions as they can. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. If you don't know me, my name is Michelle Ashcraft, and I serve as the Chief Operating Officer here for the agency. And among many things that I do, I oversee all of state financial aid, which includes the 21st Century Scholars Award. That includes our state financial aid team, who processes all state financial aid with your financial aid teams, as well as our K through 12 and post-secondary transitions team, who predominantly support scholars while they are in high school. So we cover everything from 7th grade through college when it comes to this program. These are the things I'm going to go over today. I'm going to give a little bit of background on the commission and why this program matters to the work that we do. I'm also going to give a bit of a 21st Century Scholars Program refresher, as I know some of you have been around for a long time and know a lot about the program, and some of you may be newer and don't know the history of the program, where they're going to really talk about 21st Century Scholars automatic enrollment. We're then going to talk about some historical data about what enrollment in public versus private campuses has looked like in 2- and 4-year institutions. And then we are going to talk about preparing for the class of 2027 to enroll in your campuses. At the end of this, we will share a lot of contact information. So if you have follow-up questions beyond today, you'll be able to reach out to us. And also, I want to be upfront that, again, you are going to get materials, both recording and PowerPoint presentation. And then we're also going to offer the opportunity to meet with individual campuses if you would like to discuss the potential impact for automatic enrollment further, especially if your questions are in the context of your specific campus. So you will see instructions for that at the end as well. Okay, so to kick off with some information from the commission, we years ago set a goal to have 60% of Hoosiers with a credential beyond high school graduation by the year 2025. That was part of the big goal that the Lumina Foundation set, and we have extended that goal to 2030. So a lot of the work that we do is related to that big goal, not only for the agency, but for our country as well. We also have a strategic plan that we refer to as the HOPE Agenda. HOPE stands for Hoosier Opportunities and Possibilities Through Education. And you can see on the screen here that we have 7 goals related to that strategic plan. Where 21st Century Scholars fits in primarily is with goal number 1, which is about enrollment for youth and adults into post-secondary education, and goal number 4, which is the rate at which those who do enroll complete their chosen plans of study, degree programs, etc., hopefully in as quickly and affordably a way as possible. Our 21st Century Scholars Program also informed goal number 5, which is about retaining those college graduates here in the state. We have a statistic that about 75% of Hoosiers who receive state financial aid choose to stay in state to build and live their lives after college. And the success of that informed Hope Agenda Goal 5 to work with our campuses to retain as much talent as possible after they graduate our institutions here in the state. If you have seen any presentations from the commission in the last 2.5 years, you have for sure seen these charts. We have been making quite a bit of noise about college enrollment. You can see that since 2017, we had been on a pretty precipitous decline in the college going rate, and that we have stabilized a little bit in the recent years. Our 2023 data is going to be released in May, and so we'll have an updated graphic to share once we're able to publicly release that information here in a few weeks. And our goal with this is to get back to 65% enrollment for high school seniors who after they graduate high school by the year 2030. On this next slide, you can see completion data. I want to specifically call out the extended time completion there. That actually ranks us 9th in the country in terms of completion rates, so we're really excited about that, but certainly more work can always be done. And I also want to specifically call out the rate for 21st century scholars there on the left-hand side of the screen in the graphic there. We have a phenomenon where 21st century scholars have one of the highest college going rates in the state out of all of the various demographics and subgroups that we look at. But there is still a gap in their completion rates compared to their peers. And so that's something that we already partner a lot with your institutions on. And there's still, again, good work to be done there. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide and the next one, but I mentioned in our presentation for the public campuses yesterday, I know many of you apply for grants to do specific work on your campus. Some of you have to go in front of various leaders on your campus to ask for budgets to support certain programs, and you're always looking for data to help support that. And these are two graphics that we share often, especially when Commissioner Lowry is out and about, that may be some data that would be useful for those things. So not specific to the program, but to the impact of education overall. This is our economic metrics 4x4 that we track, and you can see that for unemployment, labor participation, and wages, the increase in outcomes for Hoosiers, the more education and training that they have beyond high school. And then secondly, on this social metrics one, you can see in terms of using Medicaid, using SNAP benefits, infant mortality, and life expectancy, you can also see greater outcomes with increased education and training beyond high school as well. So this is just some data that we like to share that certainly helps build the case for higher education, but specifically considering that a lot of these metrics may be exacerbated at times for Hoosiers who are from low-income households. It's really good data to show that any amount of education and training beyond high school would likely increase the economic and social prosperity for our Hoosier families. And then to wrap up here, we have a lot of goals at the commission to be a top 10 state in a variety of things. And so these are the sort of rankings that we have achieved so far in that regard. First, you can see that we're 3rd in the Midwest and 9th in the nation in need-based financial aid. If you've been around a while, you'll know that for years we were 1st in the Midwest and 5th in the nation. And then we hit a period of time, there's always lagging data. So in the reporting window that we're in right now, there are a lot of states who received federal CARES funds that they used specifically for financial aid. And so that affected our rankings a little bit. And we suspect that as those funds are going away, that you will see our rankings increase again in that regard. We also rank 6th in the nation at holding the line on tuition and fees. We rank 9th in the nation, as I mentioned, on extended time completion rates. We rank 5th in the nation on sub-associate credential attainment. And so we certainly don't want to see that change, but our future focus certainly needs to be on increasing attainment at the associate's degree and bachelor's degree level. And then we also rank 8th in the nation for attracting students from out of state to our institutions here in Indiana for their post-secondary education. I mentioned earlier I have two teams that work with 21st Century Scholars. One is our K through 12 and post-secondary transitions team. This includes our outreach coordinators who are in the field every day, predominantly in middle schools and high schools, supporting 21st Century Scholars, and then an internal team here who supports those outreach coordinators as well as your campuses, including providing some grant opportunities for your campuses related to this program as well. This slide just shows you a little bit of what the high school journey looks like for a 21st Century Scholar. So you can see that their automatic enrollment will happen in middle school, and then they sign what's called the 21st Century Scholars Pledge at the same time that they create their Scholar Track account, which is the system that we use for financial aid and a variety of other programs, and where students will log their requirements for 21st Century Scholars. Those requirements are referred to as the Scholar Success Program, and we will go over that in a little bit more detail here in a bit. While not specific to 21st Century Scholars, we do promote for scholars and all students to consider earning the Indiana College Core or participating in career and technical education. So that's why you see that on there. And then in senior year, they will receive a pre-admissions letter letting them know the campuses that they have been pre-admitted to for those campuses that are participating, and then certainly file the FAFSA, not only for 21st Century Scholars, but to understand their eligibility for federal, state, and institutional aid. So that's a little bit of an overview from the Commission's perspective, and we're now going to give a little historical overview of the 21st Century Scholars Program. The program did begin in 1990, and so we turned 35 this year, which is a great milestone to reach. It was strategically designed as an early college promise program, so students enroll in middle school and they commit to meeting certain eligibility requirements throughout high school in order to be able to activate their scholarship to use on your campuses. You can see on the right-hand side there that, again, they do have one of the highest college going rates in the state, especially compared to their other low-income peers, which was part of the impetus for automatic enrollment. Across a variety of demographics, scholars are more likely than their peers to enroll in college. However, throughout the time of the program, we anticipate, based on a deep dive that we did into the program in 2021, which you can find on our website, that we were enrolling about less than half of eligible students. And that really was the impetus for automatic enrollment, which is why we are here today. So 21st Century Scholars at your campuses pay partial tuition. For private campuses, it pays the average cost of the four-year public institutions. You can see for the current year, that's $9,515. We know that many of your campuses offer supplemental scholarships and incentives, and part of the purpose of this presentation is so that for those additional scholarship dollars or other supports that you offer scholars, that you can prepare for what a potential influx may look like a couple of years from now. I won't go into too much of this historical timeline here, except to call out that in 2023 was when the legislation passed through House Enrolled Act 1449 that allows us to partner with the Indiana Department of Education to automatically enroll all eligible students into the program. And the 2027 cohort, as you can see there at the end, was the first cohort for us to automatically enroll. So in a couple of years, you will expect that they would be enrolling in your campuses. As I mentioned, House Enrolled Act 1449 is the legislation that made this possible, and it requires us to work with the Indiana Department of Education to identify and automatically enroll eligible students. It also requires us to mail letters to the families of those students and let them know that they have been enrolled and what the requirements are to actually be able to activate the award at the end of high school. That letter also requires us to give them the opportunity to opt out of the program for their child. We fortunately have not seen very much reaction to that. When I checked the other day, we had 3 total families opt their students out of the program. And so we don't have concern that there will be widespread opt-out of that. And the other thing I would share with you is we are monitoring who those students are. And when they turn 18, there will be a brief window of time during which we will allow them to opt back into the program, assuming that they have stayed on track to meet all of the requirements for eligibility. It's really important to know the statement that's at the bottom of this slide, which is that automatic enrollment is just giving the opportunity to a student to be a scholar, but there are requirements that they must meet to actually be able to activate their award at the end of high school and to use it on one of your campuses. So to discuss what those eligibility requirements are, scholars must be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. And this is something important for you to know as you prepare for enrolling students who have gone through this process in the future. We are not using citizenship information as part of the automatic enrollment process. And the reason why is we know that that status can change over the course of students' high school years. And we would rather err on the side of enrolling them into the program and them not being eligible at the end of high school than to not enroll them and have their citizenship status change and have missed the opportunity for them to be in the program. So currently, there are non-citizen students who have been automatically enrolled into the program and informed that they have been enrolled. They have also been informed that in order to qualify for the scholarship, they must be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen by the time they graduate, which would be June 30th after their senior year is the deadline. So just want to be transparent about that. There are multiple ways that we communicate that information, not just through those enrollment letters, but also through the ScholarTrack system and through a variety of email communications that we send to students as well. They must be automatically enrolled or apply within the 7th or 8th grade. The only exception to that rule is that Indiana Code does allow us to enroll students who are in foster care all the way up to 12th grade. So if a student is in foster care at any point between 7th and 12th, we can enroll those students. But for everyone else, the deadline is June 30th after their 8th grade year. They must agree to the Scholar Pledge, which I'll outline on the next slide. They must graduate with a 2.5 cumulative GPA. Currently, students are required to graduate with the Core 40 diploma, but Indiana is implementing what's called the new Indiana Diploma with Readiness Seals. We will accept the Indiana Diploma for 21st Century Scholars, and we will certainly promote the Enrollment Honors and the Enrollment Honors Plus seal to encourage as many students to prepare for post-secondary enrollment as possible, but the Indiana Diploma will suffice. That diploma is required with the 2029 cohort, but students can opt in ahead of that. They must complete the Scholar Success Program activities in ScholarTrack, and then there is a financial means test at the point that they file their FAFSA before enrolling in your institution. If they're going to immediately enroll, that FAFSA is based on their senior year of high school. If they take the gap year that Indiana Code allows, it will be based on the FAFSA that they filed during that gap year. The financial means test bar is pretty high, and our data shows that it's typically less than 1% of students who are removed from the program as a result of that financial means test. The pledge pretty much mimics those requirements. So again, they must complete the Scholar Success Program, earn a specific diploma type and a 2.5 GPA, agree to file the FAFSA their senior year of high school and every year that they're potentially eligible thereafter, to graduate from an eligible Indiana high school, and then to not use illegal drugs, commit a crime or delinquent act, or use alcohol before the age of 21. So they sign this pledge in order to be able to confirm that they are participating in the program. This is a screenshot of the Scholar Success Program activities. Again, they complete these in our ScholarTrack system. You can see that they're broken out by grade level. So there's 3 for 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. But the deadline to complete all of these activities is June 30th after their senior year. So we give them as much room as possible to be able to complete those activities. Okay, that is it for the 21st Century Scholars overview. Now we're going to shift to actually talking about details pertaining to automatic enrollment. I wanted to show you a snapshot of what pre-automatic enrollment and post-automatic enrollment looks like. So the last 2 cohorts before House Enrolled Act 1449 went into effect were the class of 2025 and the class of 2026. And you can see about 16,500 students applied for and were accepted into the 21st Century Scholars Program for those 2 cohorts. Since implementing automatic enrollment, You can see the first cohort is the class of 2027. We had over 45,000 students automatically enrolled. And you can see for the class of 2028, we had over 49,000 students automatically enrolled. So our anticipation was that we would double, and we in fact more than doubled the number of eligible students for the program. We are currently enrolling the class of 2029 right now, and we have until June 30th to complete that automatic enrollment. And we are already over 46,000 for that cohort at this point in time. And again, we'll continue to enroll all the way through June 30th. To give you a sense of scale, these are certainly the number of students that we have enrolled to date. The cohort sizes overall, so the potential graduating classes for these cohorts range from 86 to 91,000, but the typical high school graduating class is about 75,000. We will lose a lot of students over the course of their high school years to students moving out of state, to students switching to homeschool. Unfortunately, some students will become deceased. There's a whole variety of factors why you start with 90,000 students in ninth grade and you end with 75,000 students at the end of senior year. But to give you a sense of scale, there's a pretty significant amount of the cohorts that will now be eligible for 21st Century Scholars. So just want to be transparent about that. 21st Century Scholars automatic enrollment is based on income still. So we've always had an income application. It's now still based on income information. And the predominant way that we do that is using free and reduced lunch eligibility. We get that data from the Indiana Department of Education to be able to automatically enroll students. There are some high schools throughout the state that are referred to as community eligible provision schools. And these are schools where there's such a high percentage of free and reduced lunch eligible students that every student gets free and reduced lunch. We are not automatically enrolling 100% of those students because inevitably there are students in those schools who shouldn't qualify. So another way that we are automatically enrolling is through what's called direct certification. And in partnership with some other state agencies and the Indiana Department of Education, we are able to get information about students who have been direct certified for other benefits, such as the Sunbucks program, SNAP, TANF, etc. We have to have something that indicates that a student is eligible based on their income. So that is either that we automatically enroll them through free and reduced lunch, either that we automatically enroll them through direct certification, or that the student applies. So we are maintaining still an application process. We don't anticipate very many students and families having to do that. And the most common reason why they would is because they are electing not to enroll in free and reduced lunch or to take other benefits. And in that case, they would have to fill out an application in order us to verify that they are eligible. As I mentioned, automatic enrollment requires data, so we are getting the majority of that data through the Indiana Department of Education. They collect information from the schools, they pass that information on to us. We upload that information into ScholarTrack, and there's a process in the system through which we are able to automatically enroll students. We are doing that 3 times a year. So your campuses likely have census dates. We also have census dates with the Indiana Department of Education. For the fall semester, that happens at the beginning of October. For the spring semester, it happens at the beginning of February. And so we enroll in October and February, and then we do a catch up at the end of the year before the June 30th deadline to be able to capture anybody who became eligible after the spring census date. We, as I mentioned, are required to send letters to the families to let their students, let them know that their students have been automatically enrolled. And so we send those letters all throughout the year in conjunction with those enrollment cycles. And then we do offer the electronic application, as I mentioned. That electronic application opens October 1st and it closes on June 30th. And students have until June 30th at the end of their 8th grade year to either be automatically enrolled or to apply. When we started automatic enrollment, we discontinued the paper application. I know some of you have relationships with K through 12 schools where you may have helped with application drives in the past. The reason why we did away with that paper application is predominantly because, unfortunately, a lot of them never made their way to us. And so we missed the opportunity to enroll students, but also that has a lot of sensitive information on it. And we just don't want paperwork floating around out there, especially when the scale of applications is no longer needed. So there is an electronic application, but no paper application at this point. I mentioned that we send automatic enrollment letters. They will receive one of those by the end of ninth grade. They start receiving them in eighth grade if they're enrolled in seventh or early in eighth grade. And if they're enrolled at the end of eighth grade, then they will get that at the beginning of their ninth grade year. But at some point, everyone gets a letter. This year, we also started what are called enrollment ready letters. And this is not 21st Century Scholars specific, but does promote that students who are scholars should be paying attention to doing their activities. These went out in January of this year, but in future years will go out every September in conjunction with the pre-admissions cycle. So as seniors are getting their pre-admissions letters, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th graders will get their enrollment ready letters, and that gives them a bunch of information about how they can best prepare for pre-admissions to come their senior year. In the fall of their senior year, in September, they get their pre-admissions letter to let them know their opportunities to go to our campuses here in the state. And then in the spring of their senior year, they receive a FAFSA letter to remind them to file as well. All throughout from the time that they are automatically enrolled until they graduate, they receive all kinds of email communications from us. And we also send postcards to remind them to do their Scholar Success Program activities. Those postcards, based on a point in time, very clearly tell them which activities they have and have not done and reminds them to log into ScholarTrack and complete those activities. One thing we would just like to highlight that it will be coming soon, that we will do a future webinar about and invite you to participate, is we are going to do some re-enrollment campaigns. We have done these in the past. We have the ability to access information about students who have previously enrolled in your institutions and have left, and we can collaborate with you to help re-enroll those students. So that will be information we will share in the future. Okay, the next section is going to give you sort of some historical data so that you can get a sense of what things have looked like prior to automatic enrollment. In order to understand that data, you need to understand that there are technically two populations of scholars. There are enrolled scholars and affirmed scholars. Enrolled scholars just means that previously they applied and were in the program, and now it means that they have been automatically enrolled into the program, and both of those things have given them the opportunity to be a scholar. An affirmed scholar is those who actually did everything that they needed to do to be able to activate their award. So they created their ScholarTrack account, they signed their pledge, they did their 12 Scholar Success Program activities, they met at least a 2.5 GPA, they graduated with the diploma type that they needed, and now they're ready to go. When we report data on 21st Century Scholars, it is about affirmed scholars, not about enrolled scholars. So when we say the college going rate for scholars is approximately 81%, it is 81% of affirmed scholars, not enrolled scholars. So that's a very clear distinction to make. What that means is we have large volumes of enrolled scholars and we have a smaller population of affirmed scholars. I share that for two reasons. One, I want you to really understand the data that we have publicly available on our website and that we'll share as part of this presentation. And two, because if we really want to maximize the opportunity for automatic enrollment, we not only need our campuses to think about what it's like to support scholars once they are on campus, but what are the opportunities for you to participate with our agency and our K through 12 partners to help as many of these students maximize their opportunity to be a scholar as possible. So later in the presentation, we'll talk about how you can engage in the K through 12 space if you're not already doing that. Okay, this first slide shows for 2006 to 2022, we always have lagging data. As I mentioned, our 2023 data will come out next month. You can see the percent of affirmed scholars, again, who went to public campuses versus private campuses versus did not enroll. So over that time span, just over 68% went to public campuses, 10% went to private campuses, and a little over 21% did not enroll. Again, these are affirmed scholars who met all of the requirements to activate their awards. This is not based on everyone who was enrolled in 7th and 8th grade. Part of the reason why there would be such a difference between enrolled and affirmed is some students aren't going to meet the requirements. Some are going to move out of state. Some are going to move to homeschool, etc. So there is a gap between that. But basically, we've also shared the last 3 years of publicly available data. So you can see cohort sizes. So you can see in 2022, there is a little over 4,000 students spread across the public campuses. There's a little over 700 or almost 800 students who were spread across the private campuses, and a little over 1,300 students who chose not to enroll. So that has been the current scale of things. On this next slide, you can see 4-year versus 2-year campuses. Again, this is aggregate data. It doesn't differ a lot from the slide before, but in slight ways. And again, you can see that for all 4-year campuses, there was a little over 4,000 students. We have shared aggregate data as part of this presentation today. We are working on data by institution. We cannot share that publicly with everyone, but we can share your individual campus data with you specifically. And so when we have that available, we will let you know. And if you want to have follow-up conversations about what this historical trend has looked like for your campus, we would be happy to share that data with you. Okay. Many campuses have said, what's going to look like for the class of 2027 for my campus? In many ways, people have basically said, what's going to be my share of the pie for 21st Century Scholars? And this slide is to tell you that it is very difficult for us to be able to predict that. And so I'm going to go through and explain why. There will be some things that will help us in the future, but right now, if you're asking me, what do I think is going to happen for a specific campus in fall of 2027, it's going to be very difficult for me to answer that question. One of the reasons is because of the demographics of students who have previously enrolled via the application process versus who's being automatically enrolled now. If you go and look at the deep dive that we did on 21st Century Scholars in 2021, not only did we realize that we thought we were enrolling less than half of eligible students, but the most common demographics that we were enrolling were white and Asian female students. So when you think about the population of Hoosiers from low-income households, there's a variety of other demographics that we weren't maximizing the opportunity for enrollment. So now that we have automatically enrolled students, it's a much more diverse population of students who are in the program. Second, there is some element of likely motivation and selection bias between those who took the opportunity to apply in previous cohorts versus those who are being automatically enrolled now. And it will take us a little while to figure out sort of the difference in trends now that everyone has just been given the opportunity instead of having to take that step to apply. Additionally, as part of the requirements that they have to do throughout high school, we know that GPA is the predominant barrier to activating that scholarship. And what will happen is that if a student is struggling with their GPA in the 8th grade or 9th grade, they give up. We regularly hear that students are not completing their Scholar Success Program activities because they already think that they've lost out on the opportunity, even though there's plenty of time throughout high school to raise their GPA. And so we are increasing the amount of messaging that we do around GPAs and support for academic success. Diploma type has been a barrier for some in the past. With the switch to the new diplomas, we anticipate that to be less of a barrier. Again, they must complete those Scholar Success Program activities, and we give them ample time to do those until June 30th after they graduate high school. But it is technically a requirement to activate the scholarship. Because we give them until June 30th, while we have a publicly available dashboard that shows where students in aggregate are in the process, we can't really project like this 9th grade cohort now is this point in the process, and that means this for when they're going to enroll on a campus. There's also some aspects of how we manage cohorts and rosters. At the Indiana Department of Education, they never change a student's cohort. If they enrolled at a certain point and they were assigned to this cohort, that's the cohort that they will always be. But we have to change cohorts based on when students graduate because that's how we award state financial aid. So cohorts are fluid throughout high school for the purposes of the commission. And so that affects our ability to project as well. And then finally, we do have that financial means test at the end of senior year. And as you can imagine, it would be difficult for us to predict who would have been income eligible in middle school that won't be income eligible at the end of senior year. There are things that we are doing to mitigate as much of this as we can, and we will be as transparent as we can about data. But for you to ask me how many scholars should I expect in fall 2027 and beyond, you can imagine that it's going to be very difficult for us to answer that question, at least for the next few years until we can start to establish some trends post automatic enrollment. The other thing I want to be transparent about is you on your campuses have 21st Century Scholars. You also have Franco-Bannon students. And Franco-Bannon students historically have been students in the following three categories. They are students who missed the deadline in middle school to sign up for 21st Century Scholars. They are students who moved into the state after middle school and therefore could not sign up for 21st Century Scholars. And they are 21st Century Scholars who didn't meet all of their requirements to affirm their award, or activated their award in college and then didn't meet the renewal criteria and now can qualify for Franco-Bannon as sort of a backup option. Theoretically, if everything goes according to plan, you would remove the students who missed the opportunity to sign up in in middle school because we will have automatically enrolled them. So Franco-Bannon students in the future will be students who moved into the state after middle school and students who didn't meet their 21st Century Scholar requirements and college level scholars who do not meet their renewal criteria. So it's not that Franco-Bannon students will go away, but we anticipate the number of O'Bannon students decreasing as the number of 21st Century Scholars increases. So I just want to be transparent about that because I know many of your campuses have supports for 21st Century Scholars and some of your campuses have support for Franco-Bannon students. And so as you are thinking about funding those resources in the future, you'll want to consider the dynamic between O'Bannon and 21st Century Scholars. Okay. I've mentioned throughout this presentation that we have a lot of publicly available data. We do have a publicly available Scholar Success Program dashboard, so you can see sort of how students are moving through their high school experience. And we have a whole bunch of other dashboards pertaining to college going, college completion, FAFSA, etc. And you can break down information based on 21st Century Scholar versus non-scholar on each of those dashboards. Okay, so we're moving into the last section, which is preparing for the class of 2027. So we're going to start with some items for your campuses to consider. One thing that you should look into is who on your campus has access to ScholarTrack. For sure, it's going to be people in your financial aid office. We grant the ability for your financial aid office to give access to other people on your campus. Typically, this would be like a college success coach or an academic advisor who is specifically serving 21st Century Scholars so that they can access the same information in ScholarTrack that financial aid has access to. If you need us to be involved in conversations on your campuses about how collaborations like that can happen across your campus to enhance who has access, we'd be happy to have those conversations. Second is, do you know who your scholars are? And do the right people on your campus know who they are? Some of that is from a support perspective, but in the context of this conversation, it's really for a resource planning perspective. So if the only people on your campus who know the scale of scholars on your campus is financial aid, but we're trying to think about how to finance coaches and advisors and books and whatever else you may be providing for these students, there may be other finance leaders and other administrators on your campus who need to know. So make sure that you're including the right folks in the conversations as you're going to prepare for not only what has our trend been in the past, but what might it be in the future. And then last, you're just going to want to make sure you're proactively planning for if you have supports for scholars on your campus, how are you going to scale those if the number of scholars that you enroll increases? That may include supplemental scholarships. It may be staffing. Again, if you have coaches or advisors who are specifically serving these students, you may be thinking about how do you further enhance your affordability and accessibility efforts on your campus because you may have a greater percentage of your students who are from low-income households. And then again, if you are not already engaging in K through 12 outreach, do you think you want to engage in that? And if you are you going to need to scale some of your resources there as well? If you are interested in engaging in K through 12 spaces, again, we are doing those enrollment ready campaigns. There's some opportunities to engage and sort of follow up to those campaigns. A new thing that we are going to be offering come this fall semester that we are having communications with your campuses about for the staff who are involved in implementing pre-admissions is what we're calling College Connections. As part of the Enrollment Ready campaign, students will be directed to instructions on how in ScholarTrack they will be able to indicate the campuses that they want to hear from. So they will be able to go in and select however many institutions, and then we would be able to share lists with your institutions to say these students have expressed interest in your campus. This will be the first time ever that we have been able to share information with you about 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th graders at all, and 12th graders before they file the FAFSA. Historically, we have only been able to share information with your campuses once a student files the FAFSA and indicates your institution on the FAFSA. So this will allow us to much more proactively partner with you on early outreach to students to help them prepare for enrolling in your campuses. If you are going to communicate with those students in the future, it would be helpful, as I mentioned, to promote academic success and particularly earning as strong a GPA as possible. And if they're struggling with that, whatever, seeking resources to be able to remedy that situation. We also want to make sure that every student, whether they're a scholar or not, but specifically scholars, are creating ScholarTrack accounts by the end of their 9th grade year so that they can complete those activities that they need to do to activate their awards. We also will begin to promote the Indiana Diploma with the Enrollment Honors Seal and the Enrollment Honors Plus Seal. If you're not familiar with the new diplomas, this is not the time to have a conversation specifically about that, but we're happy to answer questions and there's lots of information online. But specifically also because for a pre-admissions perspective, our public institutions have all agreed, and it will now be required by legislation to admit those who earn the Enrollment Honors Plus seal, and we are giving private campuses the opportunity to opt in to do the same through our communications with you about pre-admissions. And then last but not least is partnering on FAFSA completion. A lot of times campuses say, if I was going to do anything in the K through 12 space, what would you most want me to do? And it is for sure helping with creating ScholarTrack accounts, promoting GPAs, as high a GPA as possible, specifically 2.5 and higher for scholars, and FAFSA completion. We can handle a lot of the Scholar Success Program activities. We certainly welcome your help, but those are the 3 most common areas where we would need the most help. Again, we have a lot of information on our website. The link at the top goes to where you can find all of our dashboards. Some specific ones are linked earlier. Many of you have reached out to us in the past about data requests, where you want information on your 21st century scholars or other things, and those requests need to go to our research@che.in.gov inbox, and then they go through a whole process to determine whether we can approve or deny those. We have 2 specific email addresses that are helpful to know for 21st century scholars. One is awards@che.in.gov, and that's our financial aid email address. Your financial aid teams interact with us there frequently. And then one is scholars@che.in.gov, and our financial aid and K through 12 outreach teams help support that inbox. If you are interested beyond this webinar and having a follow-up conversation that is specific to your campus, we are happy to do those starting later this summer and over the course of the next couple of years as you get ready for the class of 2027. And you can reach out to Hillary directly. Her email address is here on the screen if you would like to schedule a follow-up meeting about this topic. Let's see here. And this is my contact information. Again, you are also welcome to reach out to me. I will be fully transparent that my inbox is typically a little heavier than those others that I shared with you, and there are multiple people answering those inboxes, whereas I am the only one answering mine. So frequently, the fastest way to get your question answered is to go to one of our central inboxes, but if there's something you ever specifically just want to ask me, you are welcome to reach out to me as well. So with that, I see Hillary coming back on, and Kate is here as well, and so they will let me know if there's questions in the chat to answer, and if you haven't asked one yet, feel free to go ahead and put those in there.
Yep, it looks like we only have one question right now from Ashley Hardy. Are there specific times when the College Connections list will be shared with colleges in the future? And will colleges have the ability to pull the College Connections list on demand?
Yep. The folks on your campus who partner with us on pre-admissions, we will determine the cadence by which you will receive those lists. It will not be on demand to start. The only Scholar Track profiles that we have for campuses right now are related to financial aid. And we would have to build a new profile to be able to grant access to only this information and not all the financial aid information. That is something we're going to work on, but building a new profile is a pretty extensive process. And so we won't have it ready in time to release College Connections this fall. So much like we share lists of pre-admitted students directly with your institution, we will share College Connection lists until we can get that new profile built in Scholar Track for others to be able to access that information on demand. I see one in here about homeschoolers. Okay, we are not automatically enrolling homeschooled students. That being said, people move in and out of schools and homeschool all of the time. So if a student was enrolled in a school, in an eligible school in 7th or 8th grade, and at any point in time during that period, they were on free and reduced lunch or direct certified for benefits, they will be automatically enrolled. They must have been enrolled in an eligible school at the time that we enrolled them into the program. They must also graduate from an eligible school. So a student who ends their high school experience as a homeschool student is not eligible to activate their 21st Century Scholar Award. Now, we have students who will move in and out all the way from 7th grade to 12th grade between enrolling in a school and being homeschooled. But by the time they graduate, they must graduate from an eligible K through 12 school in order to activate their scholarship.
Looks like those are all the questions that we have in the chat right now.
Okay. Well, hopefully this information has been a helpful overview to you. Again, we will send out the recording as well as the PowerPoint. We will also send out some answers to frequently asked questions. And then you will have our contact information if you have questions beyond this, just generally about scholars. And then if you want to have a follow-up conversation, again, Hillary will be your best point of contact to coordinate a meeting about that. We do still have a little bit of time. So we will hang on in case people have other questions and we'll answer and capture those. But otherwise, you are welcome to sign off. And as soon as we see most people have signed off or it's been several minutes and no one's asked a question, we'll stop the recording and sign off as well. Erica, I see an eligible K through 12 school could be an online school. We do have several online schools who qualify. There is eligibility criteria in Indiana code that we follow that covers a variety of school types. And so yes, some online schools are included. Tracy, I see the number of enrolled scholars has tripled since auto enrollment began. Curious how it's possible to administer this in light of possible changes to the DOE. Can you expand a little bit on your question? By DOE, do you mean state or federal? And by administer, are you thinking paying for the scholarships? Like, give me a little bit more information on the context for your question. Just want to make sure I answer what you're asking. Okay, in terms of the money, we do not receive any federal aid for the 21st Century Scholars Program. It is fully funded by the state. When we pursued automatic enrollment in the 2023 session, and still to this day, we have a surplus in the 21st Century Scholars Fund because of declining enrollment rates in recent years for the cohorts as a whole, not just for 21st Century Scholars. And so when we went to the General Assembly to ask for automatic enrollment, we were able to project that we have enough funding to get us to the 2031 fiscal year before we would have to ask the state for more money. We also were able to project how much additional money we would need per year to be able to fund the program and communicated that to the General Assembly up front. The 21st Century Scholars Program has always been a bipartisan program since the very beginning of it starting in 1990. It is considered the preeminent early college promise program in the nation and has a lot of support from the General Assembly as well as the governor's office currently and every governor's office before. And so it is an investment that the state will make to be able to fund the scholarships for students who meet all the requirements and choose to enroll. You're welcome. All right, looks like attendance has really dropped off and I'm not seeing anything else pop up in questions. Again, if anything else happens, feel free to reach out to the email addresses we provided and we will be happy to support. Thanks so much for coming today.